Okay, let's unpack this moment. It feels like tragedy is meeting some really high-stakes diplomacy this week.
It certainly does.
We've got Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky heading to Washington. He's meeting U.S. President Donald Trump this Friday. That's October 18th, 2025.
A huge meeting.
And look, this isn't just about, a photo op or reaffirming general support. Our sources are pretty clear, and that's why we're doing this deep dive for you. Kyiv seems to be making a really urgent, maybe high-risk play for a serious step up in military aid.
And the backdrop for these talks, it couldn't be more brutal, could it? Just this Tuesday, October 14th, we saw that Russian missile strike hit a hospital in Kharkiv.
Terrible. Nearly 60 people injured.
Exactly. And that horrific event, it's not just a news headline, it's the immediate strategic context for this meeting. It really highlights why Zelensky keeps saying air defense and, crucially, long-range strike capabilities are absolute necessities right now.
That Kharkiv strike really sets the floor, doesn't it? So our task here, for you listening, is to try and cut through some of the noise and understand two key things. First, the immediate crises pushing Kyiv towards Washington right now. And second, the specifics of this one, let's call it highly controversial, weapon system that people are talking about, the Tomahawk missile. It feels like that could really redefine things.
It certainly could.
So what is Zelensky saying publicly? What's his stated goal for this trip, beyond the obvious need for immediate protection after Kharkiv?
Well, his stated goal is pretty ambitious. He put it out on X, formerly Twitter. He said he wants to secure long-range capabilities, specifically to bring pressure on Russia for peace.
Right, using military pressure to push for a diplomatic outcome.
That's the idea he's putting forward. But, the pressure wasn't just a hospital attack. The day before that, on Monday, there was that separate drone attack. It hit a humanitarian convoy down in southern Ukraine.
Yeah, I saw that. Attacking a convoy. I mean, that's the kind of target that should be completely off limits. It really shows a disregard for civilian life, for humanitarian work.
Absolutely.
What were the details there? Because that seemed to really spark an international reaction.
The specifics were pretty stark. 2 vehicles, right, belonging to the World Food Program, they were damaged.
WFP vehicles.
Yeah. Now, thankfully, no one was injured in that one.
Yeah.
But the global reaction, it was fast and it was strong. The United Nations came out publicly, condemned the drone attack. They even used the phrase possible war crime.
Wow.
And when you see humanitarian infrastructure targeted like that, it puts enormous immediate pressure on Washington to maybe greenlight capabilities that could stop Russia from operating so freely, especially with drones in those areas.
And this kind of demand for, deterrence, it isn't just coming from Kyiv, is it? We're seeing European allies also reacting, scrambling almost, to these ongoing threats.
That's right. Poland's foreign minister, Radosław Sikorski, he was just in London. And he used that visit to really push European nations towards this big collective defense idea. He suggested building a regional drone wall.
A drone wall to deter Russian incursions.
Exactly. That whole concept, a regional drone wall, it really shows you the level of anxiety in Europe about this war potentially spilling over. They're thinking about permanent infrastructure now, which signals they know they can't just rely on the U.S. forever. They need their own collective defense, too.
Which connects right back to why Zelensky is in Washington.
Perfectly, yeah. And look, this trip needs total focus from Kyiv. That's why the delegation that left isn't just Zelensky. It includes key figures like Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko and the security chief, Andrei Yermak.
So the heavy hitters.
It's a comprehensive pitch, a whole-of-government effort focused on security, but also sustainability.
Okay, so we've got the diplomatic team set, the emotional pressure from these attacks, and this growing sense in Europe that something significant needs to shift. Which brings us, I think, directly to the technology everyone's watching. The potential supply of U.S.-made Tomahawk long-range missiles. This feels like the conversation that really moves the needle on risk.
This is definitely where we approach a potential strategic threshold. And if you're wondering, what's the big deal about Tomahawks? We need to understand the system itself.
Okay.
These are Tomahawk cruise missiles. They're advanced, they're generally very reliable, and crucially, they can strike targets up to 2,500 kilometers away.
2,500 kilometers, that's significant.
It's huge. And unlike, say, some of the rocket systems Ukraine already has, the Tomahawk is a precision terrain-following cruise missile. Designed for land attack, is built for surgical strikes deep into strategic infrastructure. That range, that's the political game changer.
Let's stick with that range for a second. 2,500 kilometers. It's one thing hitting targets near the border, right?
Mhm.
But 2,500 kilometers.
Right.
What does that capability actually force Moscow to deal with, strategically speaking? For you listening, what does that mean on the ground?
Uh, Strategically, the implication is massive. That kind of range forces Russian commanders to think about threats deep, deep inside Russian territory. It means strategic assets, think key logistics hubs, command centers, maybe high-value air bases, things they currently probably feel are untouchable, safely behind the lines.
Suddenly, they're not so safe.
Exactly. They suddenly fall within Ukraine's potential strike radius. It's almost a psychological weapon as much as a kinetic one. It forces Russia to think about reallocating resources, making huge infrastructural changes deep inside their own country, just to try and maintain that strategic depth they thought they had.
Okay, that capability, that reach, it explains why President Trump has attached such a significant political condition to even potentially transferring them. It's not a guarantee. It's being dangled as this huge diplomatic lever.
Precisely. President Trump has warned publicly he might authorize the transfer, but only if President Putin doesn't halt the war. It's a classic tactic, right? Using the threat of a military transfer as a public deterrent, holding that potential escalation over Moscow's head.
So, given that the Tomahawk is such a, well, dramatic potential escalation, why do you think this specific system is drawing such uniquely strong public warnings from Moscow compared to, say, previous Western aid packages that also included longer-range systems?
I think it's that combination of precision and, well, sheer reach. Past systems, while important, were maybe seen by Moscow as extensions of the existing frontline fight. The Tomahawk, though, it represents a capability that Moscow has for a long time, pretty much reserved for itself and a few other major powers.
Right.
And the immediate reaction from Russian political figures really confirms this anxiety. You had former President Dmitry Medvedev calling Trump's remarks extremely dangerous. He specifically warned that supplying these missiles could lead to catastrophic consequences.
Catastrophic consequences. That's strong language.
That's the kind of rhetoric you pull out when you feel your core strategic safety is being fundamentally challenged.
And President Putin himself also weighed in directly, didn't he? Moving beyond just general warnings about consequences.
He did. Speaking in Moscow, he warned that the decision, if made, to provide these long-range weapons would, in his words, destroy what positive progress had recently been made in bilateral relations.
So he's framing it as a direct threat to U.S.-Russia relations.
Exactly. It highlights the incredibly delicate tightrope Washington is trying to walk here, using the threat of tomahawks to maybe leverage a diplomatic outcome, but risking the destruction of even the limited bilateral contact that might still exist. Our sources are really clear on this point. This potential delivery marks a profound shift. It would be a significant escalation in Western military support and a major, major test for Moscow-Washington relations.
Okay, so we've established the Tomahawk as this sort of high-stakes centerpiece, maybe even a gamble of this meeting. But we need to zoom out for the listener, because this push for a new, single, very advanced weapon system, it's happening against a pretty worrying backdrop, isn't it, in terms of the actual flow of aid up to now?
Yes, that resource scarcity is the absolutely crucial context here. It underpins everything we're discussing. And we have some hard data that confirms a significant downturn. There's a recent report from the Kiel Institute.
Right, the German think tank. They track this stuff very closely.
They do, very rigorously. They track global military aid to Kiev. And their latest report found that overall military aid to Ukraine has, quote, declined sharply since mid-2025.
Declined sharply since the middle of this year. That's a critical data point. We're talking about a documented drop over several months, right in the lead up to this major diplomatic push. Why? Why the sharp decline, especially since mid-2025, just when Kiev seems to need it most?
Well, the report points to two main reasons, and they're kind of linked. First, the stalling of new U.S. funding packages in Congress. That dramatically slowed down the pipeline of aid.
Right, the funding logjam.
Exactly. And second, there's been a noticeable slowdown in the pace of European deliveries as well. And this isn't just about, big headline announcements. It's about logistics on the ground. Stalled funding means fewer maintenance contracts get signed, there's a lag in delivering crucial spare parts, ammunition stockpiles start dwindling.
It affects the day-to-day ability to fight.
Absolutely. It impacts the Ukrainian military's ability to sustain operations, to maintain their equipment over the long haul.
And if we connect that resource crunch, that aid slowdown, to the military reality on the ground, it becomes even more critical when you think about what's coming next, right?
It absolutely does. Winter. Kyiv is now pressing allies, almost desperately, for renewed commitments before the critical winter campaign really sets in.
Because winter fighting is just harder, requires more stuff?
Exactly. Historically, winter warfare needs specialized gear, it burns through more fuel, needs specialized ammunition, equipment breaks down more often, so maintenance needs are higher. Trying to do all that without reliable, sustained funding for just the basic supplies, it makes even holding the line incredibly difficult, almost impossible.
So the Tomahawk discussion, while it's about strategic escalation, maybe it's also about trying to unlock any major symbolic commitment from Washington, hoping perhaps it reopens the taps for the more conventional aid, too.
That could certainly be part of the calculation. It becomes this desperate attempt to secure a big win, something symbolic that might just shake loose the broader support that's been lagging.
Okay, so that feels like the strategic takeaway here. This meeting, it's framed by the emotional weight of that horrific Kharkiv hospital strike and that deliberate attack on the humanitarian convoy. The centerpiece discussion is this high-risk, high-reward gamble on transferring Tomahawk missiles, something that would fundamentally alter Moscow's sense of strategic safety. But the bedrock context, the foundation for all of this, is that Kyiv is facing a documented critical slowdown in conventional military support, which might be forcing their hand, pushing them to seek these game-changing capabilities almost out of desperation.
That sums it up perfectly. And the question it leaves for you, the listener, isn't just about the military specs of a Tomahawk missile. It's really about the political architecture surrounding it.
Right.
Given those extreme warnings we heard from both Putin and Medvedev talking about catastrophic consequences, Putin saying it would destroy positive progress, and knowing about that documented decline in conventional aid since mid-2025, how does the potential transfer of just one type of long-range weapon fundamentally shift the political math for everyone involved? Is it just about military capability or something more?
Does the threat of escalation actually offer more diplomatic leverage than the actual delivery would? Or is the reality of dwindling aid just forcing Kyiv to bet everything on one massive, high-risk strategic move?
That's the question. And that's what really hangs over Friday's talks in Washington. That's the ultimate test.